The envelope is sitting on the kitchen table when I get home. Not on the counter. Not tucked under a magnet on the refrigerator. On the table, centered deliberately, the way you'd place something you wanted found. The return address is a law office in Baton Rouge. My name on the front is typed, not handwritten. And the postmark is from 11 days ago, which means someone signed for it while I was still 2,200 miles away, disassembling a forward operating base in the Kuwaiti heat. And they left it there. Just left it sitting. I set my duffel bag down on the floor. I do not open the envelope yet. I put a pot of water on the stove, because that's what my grandmother Celestine taught me to do when something in your chest goes cold. You put water on, you give yourself something to tend. I'm the kind of person who learned early that nobody was coming to tend things for me. Welcome to Calm Revenge Tales, where the quiet ones always have receipts, and justice, when it finally arrives completely. If this channel is new to you, subscribe before this story is over. You'll want to be here when the room goes silent. My name is Devereux Mouton. I was a staff sergeant in the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers for 9 years, which is a way of saying I spent the better part of a decade building things in places that didn't want me there, and maintaining them in conditions that weren't supposed to be survivable. I came back from my first deployment and bought a house in Point Capee Parish with $47,000 in savings, a VA loan, and zero help from anyone in my family. The house needed work. The floors were soft in 2 corners. The porch was listing. I re-leveled it myself over 3 weekends with pier blocks and a hydraulic jack I borrowed from my neighbor, Mr. Turode, who was 81 years old and had been a longshoreman, and who watched me work without offering advice, which was the greatest compliment he knew how to give. Celestine lived 4 houses down. She was 84, my father's mother, and she had been left behind by every generation of our family in the way that certain women are, gradually, through a series of small choices, each of which seems reasonable in isolation. My father moved to Houston in 2009. My uncle Remy moved his family to Atlanta. They called on holidays. They sent money at Christmas, which Celestine used to buy things for other people. She had a garden in the back where she grew okra, Creole tomatoes, and a purple basil nobody else in the parish seemed to have. She made a court bouillon on Fridays that I could smell from my porch when the wind was right. I ate dinner with her 3 times a week. She called me son, which she also called Mr. Turode, so I tried not to read too much into it. My father called her twice a month, when he remembered. I got my deployment orders in February. 18 months in Kuwait, and then a rotation that could extend. I told Celestine in her kitchen, on a Wednesday evening, while she was frying chicken livers the way she always did, in a cast iron skillet with onions and a splash of vinegar at the end. She didn't say anything for a moment. She turned the livers. Then she said, "You'll write me." It wasn't a question. "Every week," I said. She put a plate in front of me. "Don't make promises you can't keep to old women, Devereux. We remember everything." I wrote her every week. 41 letters in 14 months before she stopped being able to respond. The last one she sent back was 3 sentences in handwriting that had started to loosen at the edges. It said, "I am still here. The tomatoes came in red this year. Don't let them tell you what's yours isn't yours." I read that letter 4 times. I folded it and put it in the breast pocket of my uniform, and I kept it there for the remaining 3 months of my deployment. 3 weeks before I was due to rotate home, my father called. Not to tell me Celestine had died. She was still living then, barely, in a care facility in Livonia, but to tell me that he and Remy had been managing her affairs while I was overseas, and that given the family's various financial needs, they had decided it would make the most sense for her house to be sold. The proceeds split 3 ways between himself, Remy, and Remy's wife Darlene. I asked him who had power of attorney. He said that wasn't really the point. I asked him again. He said, "Devereux, we're family. Don't be difficult about this." I stayed on the line for 4 seconds. Then I said, "I'll be home in 3 weeks," and I ended the call. That was when I made my first call to an attorney. Not out of anger. Out of engineering habit. You assess the load-bearing structure before anything else. Celestine's house was the subject of the envelope on my kitchen table. The water was boiling. I made a cup of coffee I didn't drink. I opened the envelope standing at the counter, still in my travel clothes, still carrying 11 hours of airports in my body. It was a notice of sale. My father and Remy had located a buyer. The closing date was scheduled for 6 weeks out. The document listed Celestine as the owner of record and included a durable power of attorney, signed 14 months prior, giving Remy authority over her real property. I turned the page over. I turned it back. I read the date on the POA again. 14 months prior was 3 weeks after I deployed. I set the papers down. I went to my duffel bag. Inside, in a waterproof pouch with my military documents, was a manila envelope I had sent to myself from Kuwait, registered mail, dated 11 months ago. I had been carrying it home. Inside that envelope was a copy of Celestine's actual will, which she had pressed into my hands the morning I left for processing, saying, "Put this somewhere they can't reach." And a copy of a second document, a revocation of power of attorney, properly witnessed and notarized, signed by Celestine herself 6 weeks after the POA Remy claimed to hold. She had revoked it. On her own, while she still had capacity, she had revoked it. I had found a notary in Kuwait who handled civilian paperwork. I had scanned the originals and filed them digitally with the Louisiana Secretary of State. Then I had mailed the physical copies to myself. The envelope had been sitting in my duffel bag, tagged organized, for 6 months. I left it on the table next to the sale notice. I looked at both of them for a long time. Then I called my attorney in Baton Rouge. "If you're still with me and you haven't subscribed yet, do it now so the rest of the story finds you. This is the part where what looked like loss starts to look like something else entirely. There is a kind of work that looks like nothing from the outside." Over the following 4 weeks, I got up at 5:15 every morning, because that's when I get up. I ran 4 miles on the river road. I came home and ate 2 eggs and toast, and drank my coffee while reviewing documents. I drove 90 minutes to Livonia 3 times a week to sit with Celestine, who by then could track a conversation for about 12 minutes before the thread slipped. I brought her tomatoes from her own garden, which Mr. Turode had been watering all 14 months I was gone. She couldn't eat them easily, so I cut them very small and put a little salt on them, and she ate them out of a bowl with a spoon. And sometimes she looked at me and said, "You came back." "I came back," I said every time. My attorney's name was Eula. She was 62 years old, had been practicing property law in Baton Rouge for 35 years, and she had a way of reading documents that was like watching someone defuse something. She identified 4 procedural deficiencies in Remy's POA within the first hour. She told me the revocation was clean. Airtight was the word she used, and she didn't use words loosely. My father called twice. The first time he said that I was making things difficult for the family, and that Celestine wouldn't have wanted this. I asked him what Celestine had said in writing about what she wanted. He said I was being legalistic. I said I appreciated the call and ended it. The second time, he offered me a share of the sale proceeds, 1/4 instead of 1/3. If I would release any claim. He called this a gesture of good faith. I said I'd be in touch through my attorney. I did not raise my voice either time, because there was nothing in me that wanted to be cruel. There was only the work left to do. The manila envelope, the one I had mailed to myself from Kuwait, I put on the kitchen table each morning while I worked and put it away each night. It was a habit. I don't know why. It felt like it needed to be present. Then, on a Tuesday in October, 11 days after I got home, Celestine died at 6:40 in the morning. Mr. Turode called me. I drove to Livonia. I sat with her for a while in the room that smelled like institutional soap and, faintly, underneath it, like the purple basil she'd kept on her windowsill. Her last words to me, spoken 4 days before, when the window was still open and the morning light was coming in flat and gold across the linoleum, were these: "It was always yours, baby. Don't you let them make you forget what's yours." The reading of the will was 12 days after the funeral. Eula requested it be held in person. My father came from Houston. Remy came from Atlanta with Darlene, who was wearing a blazer and had clearly prepared for a negotiation. There was a 4th person in the room, a paralegal who took notes. And there was me, in civilian clothes, with my hands folded on the table and the manila envelope in front of me. My father looked at the envelope. He looked at me. His jaw moved once, like he was chewing something he hadn't expected. Celestine's will was straightforward. She had written it herself, and had it properly witnessed in 2019. It left her house, 4 acres in Point Capee Parish, assessed at $218,000, with a small outbuilding she used as a workshop, to me. Specifically to me. By name. It listed me as the person who had tended to this family's roots when others found reasons not to. Remy stood up. His chair scraped back hard against the floor. He said that the POA gave him authority, that the sale was already in process, that we were there to distribute proceeds, not to relitigate. Eula said calmly that the POA had been revoked. She slid a certified copy across the table. The filing date was visible. The notarization from Kuwait was visible. The date was 14 months ago. Remy said that was impossible. He said Celestine didn't have the capacity. He said she had been confused. Eula said the witnessing physician's statement was included in the filing, attesting to Celestine's full cognitive capacity at the time of signing. Darlene put her hand on Remy's arm. She was looking at the certified copy. Her hand went very still. My father, who had been quiet, said, "Devereux. She was our mother." I looked at him for a long moment. He was 63 years old and he looked, right then, like a man who had just seen something in himself he did not enjoy seeing. His shoulders were slightly forward. His eyes were somewhere between anger and something I recognized as an older thing. A fear of having been small. I could have said a number of things. I chose one. I took the manila envelope and I set it in the center of the table. She told me not to let them tell me what's mine isn't mine, I said. Those were her words. I'm giving them back to you today, because I think she'd have wanted you to hear them. Nobody said anything. Remy's buyer was notified that same afternoon. The notice of sale was voided. The property transfer was recorded with Point Capee Parish within 30 days. I offered both my father and Remy the opportunity to contest the will formally. My attorney made the offer in writing. The offer had a 14-day window. Neither of them responded within the window. The will stood. Remy sent a message through Darlene 4 months later, saying he hoped we could repair things when enough time had passed. I replied that I didn't hold what had happened against him, which was true, and that I wished him well, which was also true. I have not heard from him since. My father called on a Sunday in March. He did not apologize exactly, but he talked for a while about growing up in that house, about Celestine's court bullion, about how the kitchen always smelled like onions and bay leaf on Fridays. I listened. I did not pretend everything was fine. I also did not pretend it couldn't become fine someday, if he was willing to do what that takes. The call ended without resolution. Most honest conversations do. Celestine's house is mine now. I drive out there on weekends. I have been re-leveling the back porch, same method I used on my own house, pier blocks and a hydraulic jack, though this time Mr. Tarot is watching from a lawn chair instead of a window. He is 83 now and does not offer advice, which remains the greatest compliment he knows how to give. The purple basil came back this spring on its own. I didn't plant it. It was just there one morning in April, in the bed where Celestine had always kept it, for inches high and already fragrant in the early light. I picked a handful. I made a court bouillon that Friday, her recipe, from a card in her handwriting that I found in the kitchen drawer, next to the cast iron skillet. It wasn't as good as hers. It won't be for a while. But the kitchen smelled right. The kitchen smelled exactly right. That's the thing they never get to take. Not the house, not the land. The smell of the kitchen on a Friday afternoon, and knowing how to make it yourself. Sometimes the people who are supposed to protect what matters decide it's easier to let it go. What they don't count on is the one person who is paying attention, even from 2,200 miles away, even while building other things in other deserts. If someone in your life is being quietly written out of a story they belong in, check on them. Call them this week. Write it down. The paperwork matters. The presence matters more. Share this story with someone who needs to hear it. Leave a comment if you know someone like Celestine. And subscribe if you want more, because the quiet ones always have more story left. I'll see you in the next one.